So hi and welcome back on my channel to this brand new video. Now, as the title suggests, in this video we will take a look at how we can connect Shelly devices to our KNX installation. Because at the last Light and Building Fair in Frankfurt in the last year, Shelly announced that it will integrate KNX into its devices, so that you don't need any, let's say, protocol conversion. So for example, from MQTT to KNX or via Home Assistant, etc. But instead that Shelly devices will directly speak KNX. And this was already shown, or this was already implemented last year with a beta firmware. And in this video I will show you how you can set it up. But before that, you have to bear in mind some things to use it. Because first of all, the Shelly devices use KNX IP. So all the Shelly devices that we can integrate into KNX will be a KNX IP device. And therefore you need to have a KNX IP router in your installation. A KNX IP interface is not sufficient because the router is the only device that can convert KNX IP telegrams into KNX twisted pair telegrams. So that's the first thing that you need to know. And besides that, not every Shelly device supports KNX at the moment. There is a dedicated list on the Shelly documentation, which you can see now, and only those devices support the KNX integration of it. So those two things are something that you should consider. Besides that, the Shelly devices don't support KNX IP secure. So that's also something that you should know. And it's also, let's say it this way, KNX IP uses multicast. And multicast, there basically you don't really care about whether the telegram is being passed through to the next device or if it was lost in between. Now, on a physical connection via a physical cable, that's no problem at all. However, on the wireless side, it might come to the case where telegrams aren't sent or aren't received by the receiver, in this case the KNX IP router, so there might be some telegrams that aren't passed through. So those are the things that you need to bear in mind, or that you need to know before you go ahead and jump in and say you will now only use Shelly devices in your KNX installation. I think it's a quite nice addition. However, I wouldn't stick to only Shelly devices, definitely not. So that's basically all you need to know. So therefore, let us jump directly into how you can set it up. In my case, I will use a Shelly Pro 1PM for that. So in order to hook up Shelly to our KNX system, we first of all need to head into the configuration of our Shelly device. Now, in my case here, I have the Shelly device already updated, and therefore you can already see that here on the left hand side we can see the KNX entry. If you don't see it, well then first of all you should check the version that you are running on. So in my case here I'm on the 1.6.0 beta, but you definitely don't have to go onto the beta version. The only thing that you need to check is that you head over to settings, then here under firmware, and in here you can use the latest stable version of your Shelly device, and then you should already be able to use KNX. Now, if still after updating to the stable version or to the beta version, the KNX symbol here isn't showing up, well then unfortunately your Shelly device doesn't support the KNX integration. So that's being set for the, let's say, prerequisites that we need to do. Now, if I head into KNX, then here we can already set up some initial settings. First of all, we want to enable KNX here, and then we have to give the Shelly device its physical address. Because Shelly really isn't a native KNX device, we don't parameterize it via the ETS. So you won't see the Shelly device, or you can't parameterize the group addresses and group objects within the EDS. You will have to do it here in the web server of the Shelly device. And therefore, first of all, we want to set up the physical address of our device. Now here you could use any if you want, but if you want to do it correctly, well then you should definitely first of all check your KNX installation, which I want to do now. So I'm here in my sample project, and in here you can see the topology that I'm using. So in my case here I have an IP area consisting of two twisted pair lines, and those two twisted pair lines are connected each with a KNX IP router. So that's being said, in my case the Shelly device, as it's not a KNX twisted pair device but instead a KNX IP device, it will sit here in this area, the area 1, the IP area. And devices that are sitting in this IP area will have the physical address 10X, so any number then on the last digit. Because the first line, the twisted pair line, all those devices have 1.1.x, here we have 1.2.x, but in our IP area we will have devices with the 1.0.x. And so that's what I want to set up here. I will set it up to 1, 0, and then I will use 200. Now of course in your case you have to check your KNX installation to use the correct physical address. Down below here we can configure the multicast settings. The default values are fully sufficient. We click on Save Settings, and with that we first of all have to reboot the Shelly. So now that the Shelly has been rebooted, we can open up here this KNX entry, and down below here we can see inputs and outputs, and that's basically how we add these sort of group objects to group addresses. So all you can see here are, let's say, group objects with the defined data point type here specified down below. The same thing applies here to the inputs, however here we can configure a little bit more, which we will do shortly. Now in my case, the first thing I simply want to do is that I want to set up the switch object as well as the feedback object, because therefore I have already created two group addresses. So I quickly open them up here. Down below here we have sockets, first floor, and here I've created two group addresses, Shelly 1PM on off and on off status. So what I will do is click here on add and then simply enter 410 and 411. So 410, save it. Now we could add more group addresses to it, because remember, a group object can be connected to multiple group addresses. But this is not what I want to do. Instead, I want to enable here this feedback object. So I have to uncheck this setting here, and then I can specify a dedicated feedback object. So 411 in my case. And with that, everything is set up. And the only thing that I now need to do is I need to hook up my push button sensor and then download everything onto the devices. So here you can see the group objects, one for the switching and one for the feedback. With that set up, I can download everything onto the push button sensor, and now obviously the Shelly doesn't need to be downloaded via the EDS because we set it up via the web interface. So now that everything is downloaded, we can check if everything is working as intended or not. So I'll head over into the diagnostics so that we can see what happens. Now I press the push button, I turn it on and I turn it off, and you can see that nothing is happening. We can only see here the messages from my push button sensor, but not from my Shelly. Okay, so let's check another thing. I'll stop the communication here, and now instead of using my tunneling interface, I will use my KNX IP interface, because now we saw the communication directly on the twisted pair bus where my push button sensor is sitting. Now we will listen to the IP side. Now if I go ahead and press the push button, well, we see nothing. And that's the real issue here, because in between the KNX IP side and the KNX twisted pair side sits a KNX IP router, which filters those telegrams that don't need to be converted. And as the EDS doesn't know anything about the Shelly device, that's the problem here, because then the EDS won't tell the IP router to let the telegram for the Shelly through. What I can do instead is I can head in here to manually send the group address so that we can check if everything is working. So I click here on click on write, and then I already heard it clicking, but we can see here is the response from my Shelly device, so 10200. However, you can see the EDS doesn't know anything about the device. So how can we change this behavior here? Well, therefore, that's pretty straightforward, because what we can do is the following. We can go ahead, open up the catalog, and in here we search for an IP dummy. And then in here we can use basically any IP dummy that we want. In my case here I use one that isn't secure, so I will use this here. And then I'll drag and drop it onto the IP area. What this dummy now is, well, that's basically, this will be the representation of my Shelly device. So in here I go ahead, click on my dummy. So you can see we don't have any parameters, but instead we have here basically every group object that we can have, or let's say this way, every data point type that we can have. So here we basically only have group objects that we can connect to group addresses, so that the EDS can then set up the filter table for my KNX IP router. Because at the moment, if I right click on my router and take a look at the filter table, we can see no sockets group addresses are in here, so those group addresses will be blocked. But if I go ahead now and open up the group addresses, go into my dummy, into the Shelly socket here, and simply connect them. Now here it really doesn't matter how you connect them or to which object you connect them, because we don't use this device here to program it. We simply need it as a placeholder, so as a dummy device, so that the EDS knows that this device exists. So now I have added it to the group addresses, and if I now go ahead into the KNX IP router, into the filter table, we can see that now these sockets are added here. And this is what we need. Now, to make things a little bit better, I go ahead into the dummy and first of all change the physical address to the same address the Shelly device sits on, so here 10200. And I will also rename it here to Shelly 1PM. So with that we can directly see that the Shelly device here is existing. With that being said, I can download the router because the filter table has changed. And now if I go into the diagnostics, clear everything, and then reconnect via my tunneling interface. So again, I will now directly look into my twisted pair side. And if I now go ahead and turn the Shelly on with my push button sensor, we can see here, I will quickly filter for the group addresses here. So here we can see, here was my push button sensor, I sent the telegram on, and then the Shelly was responding with the value on. And so here now the EDS knows everything, and because we also renamed the device and set it to the correct physical address the Shelly device is using, well here then we can see it also being shown in the diagnostics. And with that I can now control the Shelly device with my KNX push button sensor. But that's not the only thing the KNX integration in the Shelly device can do. So what else can we do? Well, here we can also set up group communication or group objects for the power measurement. So here we can enable objects, for example, for the voltage. So let's set it to 412, 413, 414, 415, and last but not least also 416. Now there's a little bit of a problem with those group objects, because here in this case you can see that the only data type the Shelly supports for those analog values are 4-byte values. So here you have to bear in mind that then the device that you connect to this measurement group address also needs to be set up to this 4-byte value. Otherwise it won't work. And now here in my case also the problem is that it seems that in my Shelly 1PM here the power measurement isn't working as intended, so we will only see the values 0. However, I want to quickly set it up to show it to you how you can do it. So in my case here I have set those group addresses up, And then I can head over into the EDS, into the group addresses and add those quickly. And now here what I will do is I use those group addresses here, go into properties, and in here I can set the group, the data point type to 4-byte float value. Now you can also go ahead and set it to the real data point type Shelly is using here. In my case, I simply want to set it to this 4-byte value in order that, I remember that this is a 4-byte value. And now what I will do is I will use a 4-byte value from my dummy device here and simply connect all those group addresses to it again, so that the EDS knows that these group addresses are used. So with that set up, I can also connect my info display here on my push button sensor, which I also set up to this 4-byte floating point, and in my case I will only use the voltage here. So with that I can download everything onto the push button sensor and again also onto my router. So now everything is downloaded, I go back into the diagnostics and now I'll turn the Shelly on. And what we should see now are the measurements that will be sent to the KNX group addresses. However, therefore I also need to click here on save. So quickly turn it off and on, and here we can already see that the voltage is being sent. Now again, in my case it seems like the power measurement in general isn't working here on my Shelly device. However, this is how you can set it up. And then the last thing that you can do with the Shelly 1PM here is that you can also use the binary inputs to hook it up to KNX group addresses, because the Shelly 1PM has two binary inputs that we can use, and we can connect it to KNX group addresses. And therefore we can head over here into input, and now here we need to specify how we want to use it. So do we want to use it as a switch, button, single button dimming or dual button dimming? So in my case here I have connected to the input 0 and to the input 1 each a push button. So set it up to button. And now here in my case I get a warning because the selected mode is not supported by the current input type. So I need to head over to the input settings. It's a little bit, let's say cumbersome to have multiple menus here for that. But you also have to specify it directly onto the input here. So in my case I use a button. Save everything. And then here in this case I want to have it detached to the output, so that it's stays basically on its own. Click here on save settings. The same thing I will do with input 1, so also here change the setting here to button. So with that I can head over now into my let's say KNX settings here, and now you can see we can specify the function. So with each button press the function will get toggled. And therefore now I can specify the switch group address. So in my case here, let's say I want to use it for my switching actuator here for the living room ceiling on off. So the address 100 and 101. So 100. And the status, so the feedback object is 101. And with that being set up, you maybe have already guessed it, we need to connect our dummy Shelly device in the EDS to the corresponding group addresses. So in here I'll go ahead into my Shelly device and simply again use a 1-bit object, connect it to the group addresses that I just set up within the Shelly configuration, and then I can download the KNX IP router. So with that being set up, I can go ahead and press the push button. And as you can see here, it is changing with each button press that I do. So that's not the only thing that we can do. We can also configure it, for example, to use it for dimming. Now obviously here I would use 2 push buttons. So therefore let me reconfigure it. So here I will change it to dual button dimming. Dimming steps is full dimming, and then we can specify here the direction. So for the one input we needed to set it to on and dim up, and for the other one we need to configure it to off and dim down. So the first here is for on and up. Here we have the single push object. And here in my case, I use the spots here, so the address is 105 and 107. And yeah, that's basically the same that we can do here for the other one. So dual button dimming, in this case off and dim down. And then we will add 105 and 107. And also here now we need to connect those group addresses to my Shelly dummy object here. So I can quickly unlink the group addresses from the living room ceiling and instead now use spots on off. And we also used spots dim, and now remember, dimming is a 4-bit object, so here we will use a 4-bit object for that. Now with that I download the router. And what we can do now is use those push buttons for dimming. So as you can see, I have turned the light on, and now on the other side I can now go ahead and dim the light, turn it off, and also turn it back on again and dim it up. And so that's basically how you can configure your Shelly so that it can communicate to KNX. So to quickly summarize what you need to know. First of all, the Shelly device is not a certified KNX device, and so therefore you also don't parameterize it via the EDS. So what you need to do is that you need to go into the web interface of your Shelly device and configure KNX there. So first of all, the physical address. Remember, here we need a physical address that sits on the IP area. And then we need to set up the group addresses. Besides that, you also need to head over into the EDS and there configure a dummy device, which you can rename to Shelly, and you should also set it up to the same physical address. And then you can connect those dummy group objects to the group addresses the Shelly is using. So first of all, the purpose of this is that you will then see the Shelly device in the diagnostics and that the KNX IP routers in your installation also know about the Shelly device so that they will let those telegrams pass through. So from twisted pair to IP and vice versa. So the prerequisites to use Shelly with your KNX installation is basically that you need to have a KNX IP router, and because the Shelly doesn't support KNX IP secure, you also need to disable KNX IP secure. So that's definitely something that you should bear in mind, and that's also something that I don't really like about this solution. I think it's a quite neat solution to simply quickly connect Shelly to your KNX devices, and that you don't need to have any, let's say MQTT to KNX conversion or something else. However, if I use KNX IP nowadays, I'll mostly use KNX IP secure to have it secured connection between my IP devices. But if I bring in my Shelly device, this IP connection, there I basically have to disable it. And so this is definitely something that you should bear in mind. So I hope that this video was helpful for you so that you can hook up your Shelly devices to your KNX installation. Also, write me down in the comment section below what you think about it. Do you think it's a good solution, or do you still stick to the conventional solution like MQTT conversions or something else, Home Assistant, etc.? Write it down in the comment section below. Would be really happy to know your opinion on that. So with that, I would say if you enjoyed the video and it was helpful for you, then please consider a like on this video. That would be really cool. And also don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because otherwise you might miss out to new videos. So with that being said, I would say I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.